The day is currently in the midst of a year-long look at affordable housing in the region. What specifically do you think the legislature should do to help people who can't afford to buy a home or are struggling to rent an apartment?
Well, for affordable housing, there are certain things that can be addressed at the local level, zoning changes, for instance, for allowing more affordable housing. But really, if we want to make housing affordable, it has to be separated out from the profit motive. And it can't, if housing is only about private profit for private developers, then it's really hard to get to a level of affordable housing that we need. So for me, I think the state's role is to bring resources back to municipalities, support our towns in terms of allowing them to build affordable housing that is not, just for private profit. So that's both making connections with nonprofit groups, like in Waterford, we have a great AHEPA building, and that was an excellent partnership that we've made in the past, which provides an entire building that is affordable for elderly residents. But if we're going to really focus on housing affordability and not just developer profit, then we're also going to need dollars from the state to support that as well. So I think the state's role really is in providing the resources necessary so that it's not only about incentivizing private developers, because you look at the affordable housing legislation that already exists in our district. What is deemed affordable by the metrics in the legislation starts at about, I think it's about $1,250 a month for a one bedroom, and it only goes up from there. And $1,250 a month for a one bedroom for a single individual is not super affordable in and of itself. So I think both the state, as well as making relationships and partnership with nonprofit organizations, is the approach that we need and support for our municipalities.
So, Connecticut recently enacted a law designed to provide safeguards against lawsuits for out-of-state patients seeking abortions in Connecticut and any provider who helps them. Do you support efforts to make Connecticut such a safe haven?
Absolutely, 100%. This is about both fundamental rights for women, but also about protecting health and health care for women and for girls in our state. I am pro-choice myself. I'm very supportive of the Connecticut's Reproductive Freedom Defense Act, but I was very disappointed to see that our current representative, the current incumbent, Representative McCarty, actually voted against that legislation. To me, especially coming out of this Supreme Court decision, which repealed the protections of Roe v. Wade, we absolutely must have pro-choice legislators representing us in the state, because, as the Supreme Court very specifically said in their ruling, it is now up to your state's legislators to make that choice for your state, whether you will be a pro-choice or an anti-choice state. Representative McCarty voting against House Bill 5414 really is unacceptable to me, and ultimately endangers the life and the health of women and girls in our state.
The state's surplus has grown to over $4 billion. Do you support the decision to use some of that to lower the state's pension debt, or do you think more should be returned to the taxpayer?
With that amount of surplus, we can actually do both, and have done both in this last budget cycle, a budget which Representative McCarty voted against, which provided over $600 million in tax breaks for middle class and for working families. So I was very supportive of those tax breaks. I'm also very supportive of paying down our pension liabilities, which, again, we did in this budget. So, for instance, we talked about housing affordability. Folks who really struggle with housing affordability are people living on a fixed income, people who are retired or seniors. So to provide tax cuts to their retirement, to pensions, to the monies that they were already taxed on while working, for me is absolutely fair and reasonable and the right thing to do, and allows people to continue to afford to live in our state. So it's for me, with the amount of surplus that we have, it's not an either or. It's a both and.
How should Connecticut move forward to address climate change with regards to electric vehicles, wind power, and other, quote, clean energy strategies?
Well, for me, on climate change and green energy and clean energy, it really is an all of the above approach. We are the town and the district and region of Millstone, which both of my parents spent their careers working at Millstone. So from nuclear to investments in offshore wind, which is an incredibly wise investment for our state, for our energy needs, but also for job creation, good union, middle-class jobs, to incentivizing and helping both municipalities and individuals to put up solar panels. There's no reason why every municipal building shouldn't be outfitted with solar panels to generate electricity locally and reduce our footprint locally. For heating, geothermal heating options are already in use. Again, 4 out of the 5 schools in Waterford already use geothermal heating. So moving away from fossil fuel use, oil and gas is already a viable option. The technology already exists and is proven to be viable. So there's no reason why we can't heavily invest in making that transition. And again, at the local level, those are decisions which should be made. But if we're going to incentivize it at the state level, we must provide funding for municipalities to make that transition, and individuals as well. I'm not a big fan of providing incentives through corporate structures. I would much rather incentivize and help individuals directly to make that transition, as many do want to, but just can't afford it because it is a high upfront cost. So whatever we can do as from the state level to help defer some of those upfront costs is a wise investment, in my opinion. And for electrifying our infrastructure, as well as making owning and operating an electric vehicle a more viable option, we have to build up our charging infrastructure as well. There's a gas station on every corner, but there's certainly not a charging station on every corner. And if you don't have that type of infrastructure available, no matter how much you want to own and operate an electric vehicle, you really don't have that practical choice because you don't have the ability to charge it anywhere. So it really is an all of the above approach. And again, with making sure that Millstone operates for as long as it is viable and safe to operate, I've seen that we can extend the life of Millstone with modular units that fit into the existing footprint of Millstone, and that is something I am absolutely in favor of. Nuclear energy, and Millstone specifically, really provides that base load energy in a way that does not contribute to climate change, as does not release carbon into the atmosphere, and that's what we must do, both environmentally as well as fiscally.
Do you think the 2020 election was conducted fairly and Joe Biden won? And do you support early voting and voting by mail initiatives?
Yes, absolutely. The 2020 election was definitely conducted fairly. I, as a candidate myself, as someone who has run for local office multiple times and is now running for state office, I definitely understand the process. And with the way that our election systems work, where you vote on a paper ballot and then you put it into a counter machine that is not connected to the internet, and that those paper ballots are fully intact and can always be recounted and looked at later, there is absolutely no question in my mind, to the validity of the outcome of the elections. And of course, our administrators at the local and state level, our elections administrators, are top of the line people who are absolutely trustworthy and do their job professionally and run the elections in a fair and unbiased way. And to the second part of your question, I absolutely support changes to our election system to make it easier and more accessible for people to vote, and make our voting system and candidates who can run for office, make that system more fair. So changes such as early voting, of course, which makes it easier for people to vote on a timetable that works for them. And we are one of the very few states in the whole country that does not offer early voting. But we do have the option, and I highly encourage people to vote yes on the ballot question this year, which will be on the 2022 ballot, to allow for early voting rules to be written and to change our Constitution to allow for that. So I definitely encourage people to vote in favor of that in this year's election. No excuse absentee balloting. I am absolutely in favor of that. We should be able to, again, allow people to vote how they need to vote on their timetable. Making Election Day a state holiday so that people can take that time off and have that time available to vote. So really, any changes that make voting itself more accessible and more free, I am absolutely in favor of. As well as changing the voting system itself to have a system of ranked choice voting, which again I think is more fair because then voters, well, with a ranked choice system, you always guarantee that there will be a majority supported candidate who comes out as the victor, as opposed to our current system where you can have a split vote. I think it's more fair both to voters who get to vote for what they want and don't have to just think about voting strategically against what they don't want, as well as more fair to anyone who would consider running for office to have a chance to make their case to voters and to earn those votes and not have to be, accused of splitting a vote. So in a ranked choice system, if you had three candidates, you have someone who you really don't want, someone who you really do want, but maybe they don't have a great chance of winning, and then someone who, is acceptable. You can rank your choice first for the one and for the candidate and for the policies that you absolutely do want, giving that person a chance to earn votes, and then you rank the person who is at least acceptable to you as your second choice, so that you're not splitting your vote and helping the candidates or the issue or the policies that you definitely don't want to see get elected. And again, because it's ranked choice, it's a system of instant runoff. So in the end, whoever wins will always have a majority. So in a three-way race, it's very possible that the winner in our current system does not have a majority of the vote, and that's not particularly democratic.
On a more regional level, short-term rentals have become sort of an issue, including Waterford. I'm curious to know what you think the town and or the state should do moving forward in addressing the issue, if at all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we definitely need local ordinances which regulate short-term rentals, and really this is more, an Airbnb type style where somebody comes in for a weekend or maybe a week. And the people who come in treat it, as a vacation home, which makes sense from their perspective. But if it's somebody renting out their home in a densely packed residential neighborhood, it's not really a traditional vacation home. It's certainly not a hotel. It's certainly not a resort or a party house. It's a residential area. So I think we definitely need local ordinances which address and regulate, just like we have regulations on hotels. If people are treating their homes like a hotel, there should be some, reasonable regulation placed on that, as well as, there should be guidance from the state as well, and really look around the country at best practices in other states and in other municipalities, because this is not, only a Connecticut issue or only an issue, local to Montville and Waterford. This is something that has been dealt with time and time again across the country. So that, from my background as a master in public administration, I always look to, what works in other areas as well, in terms of, informing the policies that I support or would ultimately write and seek to pass.